Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today? Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
A couple of weeks ago, I was laying in bed trying to go to sleep, and I hear my TV come on. I lay in bed a few seconds hoping to hear my fat-ass cat jump off the coffee table. I get up and go out to the living room, and said fat-ass cat is posted up on a table by the window and nowhere near the TV remote. The way my house is set up, my bedroom is behind the living room, and my living room TV is perpendicular to the wall, not parallel. So I walk up to the back of the TV, and right when I get next to it, it shuts off. Glow of the screen disappears, sound stops. I'm 100% freaked out, so I unplug it. I go lay back down in bed. My heart is still going thump, 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 and I'm trying my best to pretend everything is A-okay. So I lay there a few more minutes, and then I hear more goddamn noise from the living room. I'm so freaked out, I get my stun baton out to go check on the new noise, because I might be able to tase a poltergeist. I poke my head into the living room. The TV definitely isn't on. I listen for a few seconds and realize the noise isn't coming from my laptop. The laptop I haven't opened in probably 2 weeks. I lift the lid on it, and uTorrent has decided to open itself and start running pop-up ads. I mute the laptop, go back to bed, and lay in bed awake until 4 a.m. In the morning, I'm texting my boyfriend about it. He does some Googling. Turns out almost dead TV remote batteries can send garbage signals that the TV will interpret as the on signal. I've had my TV since 2011, and the remote still has Vizio branded batteries. I still don't have a good explanation for the laptop. My best friend and I lived together in a 2-bedroom apartment my senior year of college. We only had one key to our unit's mailbox, so we almost left it on a little table right in the front door. A few months into living there, the key went missing. My roomie swears she remembers seeing the key on the table that day before leaving the house. She had an important piece of mail coming later that day that she wanted to make sure she got, but when she came back from class, it was missing. We looked around the house for a few days, realized it wasn't turning up, and asked our landlord for a new key. We were confused about how it could just disappear, but just accepted that one of us had probably misplaced it or accidentally taken it out of the apartment. A few weeks after losing the first key, we had a friend over for brunch, and she was putting some cinnamon rolls in the oven. All of a sudden, she asks, "Why is there a key in your oven?" Balanced perfectly across 2 wires on the middle oven rack, in the center of the rack, was our old mail key. There is no way it could have fallen into this position. It had to be placed carefully there by someone. We had just made a frozen pizza on the same rack the night before, and it hadn't been there, and we hadn't left the apartment between making the pizza the night before and making the cinnamon rolls the next morning. I still can't think of a plausible explanation to that one, except that my roommate was just fucking with me, but seeing her face that day, I know she wasn't. Before my parents split up, we used to live in this huge old house. We lived in that old leaky house until I was about 14. The thought was to renovate the nearly 100-year-old house, but I guess life got in the way for my parents. The house had 2 floors, and all of our bedrooms were up on the second floor. The largest part of the second floor was dominated by the attic. It was a creepy attic filled with discarded things from both our family and the previous owners. I knew the attic pretty well because although I was terrified of it, me and my best friend would hide things we should have there. A stolen baseball bat, fireworks, and other things 10 to 14-year-olds would hide from their parents. The attic had an old wooden door that had a key in it. The door was always locked unless someone was in there. My bedroom shared a wall with this attic. I had insomnia when I was a kid, or at least the doctors told my parents it was insomnia. One of my biggest secrets is that I slept with a nightlight on, hiding under the covers and pillows until I was 14. I would strategize how I would sleep and make it look like the bed was empty by sleeping under the mattress or by having my head under the pillows. The reason? Almost every night I would hear stuff from the attic shift and move. It often sounded like somebody was rolling heavy balls like bowling balls or the like across the floor in the attic. Sometimes I would hear knocks on the wall. Sometimes I heard what sounded like whispers. Me and my best friend would sometimes summon the courage to explore the attic in the daytime, always with the door open, never alone. I was obsessed with finding the balls I heard rolling across the floor. The other sounds I could write off as sounds a house would make, but the rolling balls and the whispers were unexplained. We never found the rolling balls, or a possible explanation, but I never found one. I do not believe in the supernatural, but for some reason I still get scared thinking about it. We moved when I was 14, and the first night after we moved, I slept with all the lights off, head on the pillow. I've slept well since. I spoke with my mother about these things a couple of years ago. When I told her about the sounds, she grew a fearful expression and said she didn't want to talk about it anymore.
This isn't about any one particular story at all. I'm just curious about your favorite topics. So, I know mine. What are yours? See you soon.
This one is always hard for me to write about, not because of the subject itself, but because it's so difficult to articulate what happened. 6 years ago, my best friend and I were driving in the car when I was suddenly overcome by an unusual feeling. Again, it's very hard to describe. I'd never felt anything like it before, and haven't since. But the closest phrase to use might be surreal dread. It felt like we were watching ourselves in a horror film, if that makes any sense. Nothing felt the way it had only minutes before. It was like we had driven into an alternate reality where everything was just a little bit off, and nothing seemed right. A few minutes after I realized this, my friend asked, "Do you feel that?" It made the hairs on my neck stand up. I asked him to describe what he was feeling, and he put it like this: "It's not depression, it's not panic, it's not paranoia, I'm not hallucinating. I don't know what's wrong, but something clearly is. I started to feel it just a few days ago." This obviously freaked us out a lot, but we didn't know how to handle it. There was no way of telling other people how we felt. We hoped it would pass whatever it was, but it didn't. Over the next few days, the weird feeling grew stronger and stronger for both of us. And then out of the blue, a third friend called and confided in us, revealing that he had been feeling the exact same thing. We started to referring to it as the ominous presence. We found that if we ignored it, the feeling still seemed to be there. If we talked about it, it seemed to grow stronger and stronger, to the point at which it made us feel physically ill. That was a horrible summer. Eventually, we gathered together late at night and decided to perform a ceremony to banish the thing, whatever it was. None of us were strong believers in the supernatural, but it seemed like the only way to handle our situation. We wondered if it might be a thought form or tulpa or dweller on the threshold, something our minds created that grew stronger and stronger the more we believed in it. After our ceremony, it seemed to go away for a long time, but there's always a lingering fear that it's still with me. Last week my friend killed himself unexpectedly, which makes the memory all the more confusing and upsetting. I still don't know if the ominous presence was supernatural, but it's clear from the way things turned out that the mind is a very complicated thing. When I was in my early 20s, my then boyfriend and I lived in an old house that had since been turned into 4 apartments. We were one of 2 on the top floor. Our apartment was the only one with access to the attic of the house. The door was in our bathroom but was painted and sealed shut. We assumed because landlord didn't want anyone up there. Naturally, we got it open and went up to check it out. Nothing out of the ordinary, just an empty, dusty attic. We had many odd occurrences in the year and a half we lived there. The scariest for me was one night I came home after closing at my job, so at about 1 a.m. I arrived home and was home alone, changed, and did a few things and headed to the bathroom before bed. As I'm on the toilet, something slams into that door enough to shake it in its frame. I don't think I've ever moved that fast in my life. Jumped up and ran out of the room without even pulling my pants up. Got redressed and headed to my parents', where I spent the night. The next day, my dad and I got back after some calming down, thinking maybe an animal got in there somehow. We pry the door back open and go up to check it out. Nothing there, nothing to explain what it might have been, and had there been an animal or something, we would have seen tracks on the floor was covered in dust that was undisturbed. We used to hear what sounded like dragging sounds and odd things a lot in the house. I tried to research the address to see what I could find out about the history of the house, but found nothing out of the ordinary. When I was 8 years old, my room was on the second floor of our house, with the window facing the street. I liked that room because there was a street light right outside that made the whole room glow a pleasant orange color at night, and I was and still am terrified of the dark. One night, I had stayed up reading. I had just discovered Percy Jackson, and I heard a rustling sound. At first, I rationalized it was my cat, but she was asleep in the hall right outside my doorway. I realized it was coming from outside. I was terrified, but I couldn't not check. So I slowly sat up in my bed, rose up onto my knees, and peeked out the window. There was a man in the flower bed, crouched in the lavender bush. He was wearing an old black hoodie and jeans, and his hands were so pale they glowed in the combined lamp and moonlight. I was so scared, but mostly puzzled, because if someone was going to break into my house, I'd think they'd go to the backyard, where there is no light at all. Not the front yard below the open window of a lit room. And, plus, he was facing away from the house, as if he was watching the street for something. I ducked back into the bed and covered my head with the blankets. He returned every night for the next 12 days, always crouching in the lavender bush in the full glow of the streetlight. I don't remember why I didn't tell my parents. On the 13th night, as I watched him, he suddenly froze. He had been still before, but somehow he completely stopped moving, as if he were made of concrete. He slowly stood up, and he was tall, so tall. My bedroom window is at least 15 feet above the ground, and the top of his head almost reached the sill. But somehow the proportions of his torso were the same as a normal person's. Like, just his legs were 12 feet long, or he was standing on a ladder. He slowly turned his head to me and stared at me, except he didn't have a face. It's not that there wasn't features and it was just skin or anything. It was that under the hood of his jacket there was just shadow. His face should have lit up from the light coming from my room, but there was nothing there. I could even faintly see the back of the hood through the darkness. Even though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel them staring straight into mine, and it felt like he had crawled into my skin. My whole body felt wrong, like he had poured the shadows directly into me. He raised his completely white hand. He didn't even have fingernails, and made the shh gesture where his mouth should be. And then he turned around and disappeared. He didn't fade or anything. He was just gone like he had never been there. All these years I thought it was a recurring bad dream, or just my infamous imagination. I had convinced myself he was part of the story I wrote, or maybe a book I'd read, but then a month ago he came back. I'm 20 years old, living in a third-floor apartment. I had just finished my math studies, and I went to close my window since it was well past midnight, and the desert where I live gets cold at night, and he was there, staring at me. He didn't reach my window. He started. I felt the same molten dread in my whole body. He raised his hand in the same gesture, and then he was gone. The next morning, still convinced I had imagined it, I inspected the bushes below my window. There were 2 columns of broken branches and crushed leaves where he had stood. I was home alone one evening and had gone to sleep for the night. I live with my significant other and 2 indoor cats, but she was out of state traveling for business. I woke up in the middle of the night, wasn't sure of the time, but it was completely dark because my body was freezing cold. I actually like it cool when I sleep, and usually have the temperature around 70 degrees or colder since I live in central Texas. But this was different. I was ice cold but wrapped in blankets. I was the middle of summer, so evenings aren't cold. When I grabbed my phone to look at the time, it seemed to be off, and I pressed the on button, but it didn't turn it on. Since I was half asleep, I shrugged this off. I walked out my bedroom to go adjust the thermostat and noticed that the cats weren't around. This was weird because these fur balls are always hanging out in the bed or around the bed. Anyhow, I walked to the thermostat and tried to adjust it, but the power to the thermostat, I have a Nest, was nil and the power to the house seemed to be off. I peeked out of the upstairs window to see if any of my neighbors were having power issues and noticed all of their outdoor lights were working just mine. From the time I woke to this moment, I was probably 1 to 2 minutes maximum. I decided to wander downstairs to grab some wine. Startled when I realized there is a glow of light coming from the first floor. The way my house is situated, I couldn't see the light until I had approached the stairs. I found this odd because the power seemed to be on out just upstairs, which didn't make a lot of sense. I started walking down the stairs and began to hear a faint humming noise. The noise had a high pitch to it, arbitrarily pulses of low sounds, almost like a muffled weed whacker that someone is throttling at random. As I continue to walk down the stairs, I spot a dark, slowly moving figure in the room with light at the bottom of the stairs. The next step from what I take feels like I walked off the side of a cliff, or we got sucked into the floor. That is really the best way I can explain it because I don't remember what happened after that moment. I lost all my feelings from my body. My next memory is waking up again to the sound of my phone's alarm. Everything seemed to be back to normal. I sat there in bed, Kat's back to being lazy in bed next to me, and tried to think about the 2-minute incident that happened to me, middle of the night. I'm not a sleepwalker, and I was definitely not dreaming. My security system's app shows the time whenever a door is opened or unlocked. Realized that my security system was disarmed on the app and that the front door had been opened and closed several times throughout the night. I pulled up my security footage from the exterior cameras and was surprised to learn that there was zero footage from the night. Like the motion sensors reacted to a random car driving by about 10 p.m. and then the next thing is another random car. In the morning, so someone or something walked in and I was out of my door, but the cameras did not capture any footage. My neighbor across the street has a good security system that points at my house, so I asked if he can review the footage from his cameras. I told him that some made-up story about how I thought someone had broken into my truck. Anyway, he said it was weird because when he pulled up the footage from that night, his cameras did not record anything. Just a time gap once again. My first thought was that I was sleepwalking and that the ancient memory was a dream. But it just couldn't have been. When I looked out the window in the middle of the night, I distinctly recall a red lipstick. I just distinctly remember a red pickup truck parked in the wrong direction in front of the neighbor's house. I always notice where cars are parked, left wheel to the curb, because I've gotten a ticket for this in the past. Anyhow, the truck was not there because I went to sleep based on footage, but was there in the morning based on footage. So the truck was there when I saw it in the middle of the night. I definitely woke up in the middle of the night, cold as ice, no cats, no working phone or thermostat, saw the truck out of my window, and then got warped by something on the stairs. A couple additional things were different in the house. The security system was disarmed, and I definitely armed it before going to bed. The light was still on downstairs, and that was absolutely off before I went to bed. My whole body smelled like burnt marshmallows. I know this is weird, but it's really how it smelled. And lastly, my 55-gallon fish tank that sits at the bottom of the stairs in the entryway was missing 2/3 of the water. Seriously, what the did 40+ gallons of water go? The whole area around the tank was bone dry and the fish were fine. I think I was mind effed by some thirsty aliens.